right, that should about do it. Okay. Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Freeform Fridays with Fraggoth. Today, um, I'm going to be reading some more from some of those Tales of Star Wars Tales of books that I had mentioned. This one will be slightly less edgy. Um, this will be from Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, and the first one I'm going to do is going to be about the that band playing the Mos Eisley Cantina theme, as people probably will remember. Those bald aliens with the black eyes and the funky instruments. One thing worth noting is there is a very, very, very unfortunate usage of a fantasy term. Uh, you'll know it when you hear it, for sure. You will not be able to miss it. I don't remember how often it is used, and I'm gonna hope it doesn't tick off any sensors or anything. You'll know when you hear it. But it's about the band. Um, and from there, I think I'm probably going to do. Oh gosh, where is it? I should have really had this planned out a bit better than I do. I think I was going to do the Tale of Dr. Evazan and Ponda Baba, or was it the Bartender's Tale? I think it was the Bartender's Tale. Yeah, the Hammerhead's Tale is also very good. Um, so I might wind up doing that as well. They're all pretty good. Some of them are darker than others. Where is? No, I just have to get to the page. Here we go. Okay. We Don't Do Weddings, The Band's Tale by Kathy Tyers. Jabba the Hutt's cavernous, smoky presence room stank of spilled intoxicants and sweaty body armor. Guards and henchmen, dancers and bounty hunters, humans and Jawas and Weequays and Arcona lay where they'd toppled, crumpled under arches or piled in semi-private cubicles or sprawled in the open. The inner portcullis yawned open. Just another all-nighter at Jabba's palace. The portcullis bothers me. What if we want to leave in a hurry? But it keeps out the worst of the riffraff. Let me rephrase that. The worst of the riffraff, Jabba himself, paid us well. Crime lord, connoisseur, critic, his hairless, splotchy tail twitched in rhythm when we played. Not our rhythm, his. We are Figrin Dan and the Modal Nodes, members in good standing of the Intergalactic Federation of Musicians, and we are, or were, Jabba's full-time resident entertainers. I've never spotted his ears, but Jabba appreciates a good swing band. He also likes controlling credit and inflicting pain, and he finds either more therapeutic than our music. Huddled on the back of the stage, we put away our horns while Jabba's guests snored. My fizz, you symphonic ridgebrows would call it a Dorinian Beshniquel, but this is jizz, slips into a thin case in less time than it takes to roll an Imperial inspector and check his pockets for credit vouchers. We are Beth. Our high, hairless craniums manifest a superior evolutionary level, and our mouth folds pucker into a splendid embouchure for wind instruments. We perceive sounds as precisely as other species perceive color. Our band leader, Figrin Dan, was wearily swabbing his clue horn. There's a joke there, but you'd have to speak Bithian to get it. It's a longer double reed than my fizz, richer in pastel harmonics, but not so sweet. Tedden and Ichabel were arguing over their fanfare cases. Nalan had started disconnecting the hornbells from his band fill, and Tech, we look alike to Nong Bith, but you might have picked out Tech by the glazed gleam in his eyes, sat slumped over his Omni-box. Plaster chips from a midnight blaster skirmish littered the Omni's reception dish. The Omni clips our peaks, attenuates the lows, reverbs, and amps the total sound. Playing it takes even a Bith's full genius. Tech hates Figrin. Figrin won the Omni last season in a sabacc game. Hey, Doik. Figrin's head glistened. It was going to be a typical Tatooine scorcher, and Jabba's temp exchanger needed repair. I cinched down my fizz. My fizz. What? I had a shot lip, as humans call it. I was in no mood for foolishness. Time for a friendly hand of sabacc. I don't gamble, Figrin. Figrin brushed the sheen off his head with one knobby hand. You're thermal, Doik. And you're compulsive. All musicians are thermal. You're thermal for a musician. Who ever heard of a bander that didn't gamble? I'm the band's inside outsider, the straight man. I've carried that sweet little fizz through 6 systems. I peg it when it cracks and lube it when the keys click. I carve my own reeds. I wasn't betting it on any sabacc match. Not even to placate fiery Figrin Dan, a band leader who criticizes every missed note, owns everybody else's instruments, and isn't shy about giving orders. I don't gamble, Figrin. You know that. A smoky silhouette rolled in through the main arch. Figrin, I mouthed. Turn around. Slowly. The droid's wasp waist, huge shoulders, and squared-off head had scalded my memory shortly after Jabba had given us our exclusive contract, his vintage E-522 assassin. E-522 had saved my neck when one of Jabba's human sail barge tenders accused me of munching out of Jabba's private snack tank of live freckled toads. Luckily for me, E-522 gave me an alibi. I'd vowed never again to have more to do with humans than necessary. But Jabba had been hot to feed someone to the Rancor. Justice would have suggested throwing in my human accuser, but Jabba and Justice are not on speaking terms. They dropped E5, liberally smeared with meat juice, through the Rancor's trapdoor in front of Jabba's throne. By the time Jabba's huge, slavering mutant spat him out, he was beyond repair. Or so I'd thought. Was he back for revenge? He wore no restraining bolt. Rolling around a blaster-scarred column, he headed toward us. Frantically, I looked around. Nobody showed signs of waking up to rescue us. The droid raised his upper limbs. Both ended at elbow joints. Somebody disengaged his business parts, but that didn't leave him helpless. Assassin droids carried backup. Figrin Dan? He asked in a brassy green treble. What would you do if you found him? Figrin sidled closer to me, trying to sound colorless. I've never carried a blaster. I wish I'd had one then, for all the good it would have done. Message delivery, honked the droid. Do not fear. My assassination programming has been erased, and as you can see, my weapons are gone. My new employer saved me from deconstruction by using me this way. He doesn't remember us, Figrin whispered in Bithian. His memory's been erased too. As I slowed my breathing, my long-standing attitude about assassin droids resurfaced. Never worry about one you can see. He hadn't fired before we spotted him, so we were safe. And I've always gotten along better with droids than with most sentients, particularly humans. But as for stripping E5 of his weapons, that would be like saving my life by cutting off all my fingers. Who's your new owner? I asked. The droid hissed, shushing me with white noise. I dropped my voice. Who? I repeated, sotto voce. The answer came softly. Mistress Valerian. Oh ho! Val to her friends, Jabba's chief rival in the spaceport town of Mos Eisley, a tusk-mouthed whiffid recently arrived on Tatooine. Gambling, weapons running, information for sale, the usual. But she'd thrived. No wonder she sent a recycled envoy. Now that I'd processed the lack of immediate risk, I leaned back against the stage. What does she want? She wishes you to hire your services for a wedding, to be held in Mos Eisley at her Lucky Despot Hotel. I'd heard of the Lucky Despot. Figrin puckered his lip folds. We don't do weddings, we answered in unison. Please understand, a wedding gig wastes 2 days, 3 days with some species, plus the time it takes to learn new music. You're treated like a recording, told to repeat impossible phrases and lengthen the usual processional, in order to play a final chord as the nerve-racked principals arrive center stage. If they arrive. Someone always brings a screaming neonate. Then the reception, where they inebriate themselves until no one hears a note. All this for half pay and full satisfaction. You've helped perpetuate a species. E5 swiveled his flat head toward Figrin. Obviously, his recognition circuits still functioned. Mistress Valerian procured a mate from her homeworld, he declared. Good thing I wasn't drinking. I'd have choked. The only thing uglier than a hut is a whiffid. I tried to imagine another gargantuan, rank-furred, yellow-tusked whiffid arriving on Tatooine. Valerian had probably promised luxury accommodations and good hunting. Wait till he saw Mos Eisley. The droid continued. This job is for their reception only. Mistress Valerian offers your band 3,000 credits, transport and lodging provided, and unlimited meals and drinks during your stay. Also, 5 breaks during the reception. 3,000 credits? With my share, I could start my own band, live in the finest habitats. Figrin hunched forward. Sabacc tables? He asked. Too late, I recovered from my greed attack. Jabba had given us an exclusive contract. He wouldn't like our performing for Valerian, and when Jabba frowns, somebody dies. No, Figrin, I thought. Except while performing, certainly, the droid answered. I buzzed my mouth folds for Figrin's attention, but his sublime vision didn't deal me in. Figrin set down his deck and commenced negotiating. We flew into Mos Eisley during the first twilight, with one of the suns dipping behind a dull, murky horizon. Our cramped little transport skimmed through the decaying southern sector, chauffeured by an orange service droid. He, like the former assassin, wore no restraining bolt, which predisposed me to like their owner. Sentient shadows slipped into darkening corners as we drove past. The byword in Mos Eisley, which looks like a cluster of populated sand dunes, is camouflage. If nobody sees you, nobody shoots you, or testifies against you in what passes for local courts. 3 stories above one of Mos Eisley's nameless streets, twin beacons blinked like ship lamps, and brilliant yellow beams glowed out of a wide-open entry hatch. The droid maneuvered us closer. A long, curving ramp and straight stairs swooped up from the street level to elevated main entry. Beneath the stairway, I spotted the hotel's most notable feature, 3 large portholes. A group of investors crazy enough to sink their credits on Tatooine had towed a beat-up cargo hauler here and sunk a quarter of it under the sand. Debris blown in by a recent dust storm lay clumped along its near side, which had been starboard. Antenna cluster wreckage drooped over what must have been the cockpit. I mentally saluted the Lucky Despot with the spacer's traditional appraisal of somebody else's ship. What a piece of junk. Our speeder settled at the foot of the long ramp. Disembark here, gentles, droned the droid. We unloaded our gear from the Airbus's cargo compartment onto a repulsor cart. We'd only brought 1 change of clothes and our performing outfits, and left the rest of our belongings at Jabba's palace. Mos Eisley's odors, ship fuels, rancid food, low-tech industrial haze, and the sheer desensitizing smell of hot sand hung in sullen air. Once inside the lobby, we blinked while our eyes adjusted. An orange-suited human security guard slouched at one corner. No sign of Lady Val. Mentally, I recategorized her. She might trust droids, but she equated musicians with kitchen help. This way. Our droid led us past an extremely attractive front desk person, species unknown to me, whose multifaceted eyes glistened prettily. A long, vast room filled a third of the X-ship's top deck. Reflective black bulkheads and a shiny black floor enveloped several dozen sparsely populated tables, but more than one table tottered over damaged legs. And here and there white strips showed through the peeling black bulkhead. In here, the famous Star Chamber Cafe, We set up and started a number to get the room's acoustics. Early diners clapped, clicked their claws, or snapped their mandibles. Satisfied, we repacked our gear and grabbed an empty dinner table. Within minutes, the show began. A comet whizzed past Figrin's head. Constellations appeared beneath the ceiling and reflected in my soup. Holographic sabacc spreads flickered into existence over several tables. Now I remembered the rest of what I'd heard. Jabba had made sure the despot never got her gambling license from local imperial bribe-meisters, so Valerian had to hide her gaming equipment until dark. Reportedly, Jabba warned Lady Val of planned police raids. For a price. Figrin ate rapidly, pulled out his deck, and wandered away. Tonight he would lose. On purpose. My other comrades joined a low-stakes shikeli match. I found a bored-looking Cubaz security guard and struck up a conversation. Cubaz make excellent security staff. Their long, prehensile noses discern scents the way Bith distinguish pitch and timber, and a Cubaz's greenish-black skin blends into every shadow. In exchange for my personal stats, which he probably knew anyway, and a mug of mildly intoxicating lum, I found out that the green-caped Cubaz's name was Thwim, that he was born on Kubindi, and that Mistress Valerian's prospective bridegroom, Dewap, was an expert hunter. Common enough profession on their homeworld. I also spotted a familiar triangular face. Not friendly, but familiar. Kodu Terrafin pilots Jabba's courier run between palace and townhouse. He's Arcona. Dressed in a spacer's coverall, he looks like a dirt-brown snake with clawed legs and arms, and a large, anvil-shaped head. I kept up my conversation with Thwim as Kodu minced from table to table, swiveling the anvil head. I watched sidelong. Abruptly, I spotted the yellow-green glitter of his eyes. Immediately, he slithered in my direction. He's got me mixed up with another Bith, I thought wearily. Thwim pushed back, lifting one edge of his cape, and made room for Kodu.
Figrin, is it?
The bulbous scent organ between Kodu's faceted eyes twitched. Not quite, I mumbled.
Oh, Doik. Sorry.
At least he knew my voice.
Information for sale. Want to find Figrin?
I glanced toward Figrin's glimmering holographic sabacc table. Our leader hunched crookedly over his cards, feigning intoxication. Not a good time to interrupt. Who made Doik Nats the band manager, I wondered. Kodu pushed closer.
I don't want to stay, he hissed. Do you want to buy? You'd better.
He smiled smugly. 10, I offered. Figrin would cover that, if the news was worth hearing. Thwim watched the Uvid wheel studiously. His prehensile nose quivered as a cluster of Jawas hurried by, jabbering rapidly.
100,
Kodu answered without hesitation. Within 3 minutes, we'd settled on 35. He aligned his cred card with mine, and we effected the transfer.
Jabba.
Kodu clicked his finger claws.
He's angry.
Angry? I glanced away. Who, this time? Why?
You skipped out on your contract.
My stomachs knotted around each other. We got another band to cover for us. Not as good as we are, but
Jabba noticed.
It was the worst compliment imaginable. Who'd have guessed the big slug paid attention? What did he do? Kodu shrugged.
Fed 2 guards to the Rancor and promised.
He shrugged again, skinny shoulders rising along his brown neck. Promised to pay well if someone hauled us back to the palace. Goodbye, IFM retirement home. Thanks, Kodu. I tried to sound as if I meant it. I'd left a sentimental mother at the bubbling pink swamps of Clackdoor 7. She missed her musical son. Kodu touched his blaster.
Goodbye, Doik. Good luck.
Luck. Right. Either we slipped out of Jabba's range fast, in which case Kodu wouldn't see me again, or... I weaseled through the crowd to Figrin's table. Fortunately, Figrin had just lost big time. Aduro shuffled the sabacc deck, scattering and regathering card tiles with a deft gray hand. I tugged Figrin's collar. Finish up. Bad news. He excused himself droopily and arose. It takes twice as long to cross a room when you're looking over your shoulder every other step. Jabba pays well for mayhem. We found an empty spot at the bar. What? Figrin's eyes seemed to have shrunk. Spicing already, or faking it well. I dropped the news on him. We've got our instruments and 2 changes of clothes, I finished. But I'm losing. I'm behind. I flicked my mouth folds. We would also need this gig money to buy food until we could get another job, or Jabba recovered from his temper. I explained that to Figrin. Barlight reflections wobbled back and forth on his head as he shook it. We'll get off planet, he said. What about your stash back at Jabba's? Nothing irreplaceable. We'll leave tomorrow afternoon, after the wedding. I'm ready for bigger crowds again. I agreed. Even if gigs aren't so regular out there in the competition. We've always had a following, but you can't eat esoteric. Richer tables, too, he added, gilding his voice. Somebody'd better stay awake tonight. Did I hear you volunteer? So the spicing act was just that, an act. I'll take the first shift, I said. Our band set up bleary-eyed the next morning in the Star Chamber Cafe. After breakfast, wedding guests started prancing, oozing, and staggering into the Lucky Despot's lounge. Waiting in the cafe, we tuned. I tried to imagine a whiffed wedding. Did they osculate, lock tusks, or shout battle cries at the climactic moment? I'd spotted 2 turbolifts, a kitchen entry, the main entry, and a small circular hatch that must have once been an emergency airlock. My caped, long-snouted friend, Thwim, staunchly held up one end of the bar. Around 10 banqueting tables, Lady Val's staff laid out food, programmed bartend droids, and hung garlands, making the Star Chamber as classy as it could be, given its state of disrepair. Beyond the big table lay a dozen little ones. I could almost feel Figrin's mouthfolds twitch, anticipating a wealthy crowd in the mood to celebrate. A red, raucous cheer erupted in the lounge. They must be married, Figrin mumbled. Beings streamed out into the cafe. Figrin swung into our opening number. Before we finished, I'd started to sweat, and not from the heat. Several of Jabba's toughs had ridden the wave of that stream into the cafe. Were they invited guests? Or had Jabba set us up on a one-way trip to the great pit of Carkoon? One more time, I looked around at Valerian's security. E522 stood behind her back hatch, gleaming new blasters and needlers retrofitted for the occasion, and a shiny new restraining bolt dead center on his massive chest. Evidently, she only trusted droids so far. A young human tottered up to our stage, wearing clean, unpatched clothing and a slouch. Play Tears of Aquana. He tugged Figrin's pant leg where it gathered above his boot. Figrin pulled his leg free. The human repeated his request, then headed toward me. I didn't want my pants stretched. Got it, I said toward him, and then took a fast breath and hit my E-flat entrance. How are we to know that a local gang had adopted one of our numbers as their official song? The slouch and several friends huddled at the foot of our stage and caterwauled lyrics they'd obviously invented. Several other humans lurched toward the stage, glaring. I elbowed Figrin. He took an unorthodox cut to the coda. We finished playing before the gang finished singing. Several of them glowered. One newcomer, a darkly tanned female, shoved a non-singing bystander aside. Now play Worm Case, she growled in a voice that matched the shade of her skin, for Fixer and Cammy. Got it, said Figrin. I have a 6-bar intro into Worm Case. I cut it to 4. When you've played a piece 600 times from memory, you lose track of where you are during the 601st. This time through, it became a crazy game of cut and patch. I don't remember having so much fun with that moldy jump tune. This group didn't try to sing. Thwim and another security guard accompanied both gangs away. I rechecked Jabba's toughs. They'd gathered near the bar, just killing time. For now. At the end of that set, Figrin headed for a sabacc table. I lingered on stage, up out of the congealing smokes and odors. One of the ugliest humans I'd ever met, with a diagonal sneer for a mouth, sauntered over carrying 2 mugs. You dry? He asked in a surly black tone. This one's lum, that one's wedding punch. Thanks. Despite my distaste, I seized the mug of punch and put down half of it. You're welcome. My plug ugly sat down on one edge of the reflective bandstand, then stared out over the crowd, not wanting to turn his back. Probably a native. I wonder if he'd consider it polite to ask his name, or if he'd take a swing at me.
Good band, he muttered. What are you doing on Tatooine?
I set down my mug beside the Omni. Good question, I said stiffly. We've played the best Palladiums in 6 systems.
I believe it. You're excellent. But you haven't answered my question.
I began to warm toward him.
You're looking at it.
I nodded down toward Figrin's gaming table. We were passing through and got stuck. You work around here?
Yeah.
Sounding blue-gray, he picked up my mug.
I tend bar up the street. Rough living, but somebody's got to keep the droids from taking over.
I hissed softly in a range humans find inaudible. Droids improve life. I was getting ready to remind him when he said,
Keep your reed wet, my friend,
and hustled away. Was he one of the rare, approachable types? Had that been a warning? I looked for Thwim by his green cape and twitching snout, but I couldn't spot either. Soon Figrin rejoined us on the bandstand. Losing? I murmured as he plugged in his horn.
Naturally. Give me an A.
We swung back to work. At the table just below us, something changed hands with infinitesimal micron-per-minute movements. A normal Mos Eisley business deal. Something else, something huge, lumbered into view. 2 gargantuan whiffids, 2.5 meters of tusk and claw and pale yellow fur, lashed together with a garland of imported greenery, danced toward our stage with their long furry arms draped around each other. I stood on a platform, but their heads towered over mine. Dewap stared rapturously into the broad, leathery, tusk-bottomed face of his bride. Without seeing the surreptitious traders already occupying the closest table, the despot's owner and her professional hunter sank onto empty chairs. They started untwisting greenery. I held my head at an angle that made it look as if I were staring out over the dance floor, but actually I was watching one of Jabba's toughs, an anemic, gray-skinned Duro, glide in our direction, alone. A trio of pap-facts twirled past, entwining their turquoise tentacles in something that looked like a prenuptial embrace of their own. They nearly tipped over a mouse droid wheeling toward Lady Val. Seeing the droid, our hostess bride excused herself from Dewap with a fond pat of his lumpy head. She followed the droid toward her kitchens. The Duro's red eyes lit. He edged along the dance floor, approached Dewap, paused, and bowed. Good hunting, Whiffid? Jabba's Duro shouted, gargling through rubbery lips. He extended a thin, knobby hand. Dewap's massive paw closed on the Duro's arm, dangling a ribbon of leaves.
Explain that remark, Duro, or I shall serve your roasted ribs to my lady for breakfast. No.
The Duro rocked his head, cringing.
I do not signify your lovely mate. I am addressing Dewap, bounty hunter of great repute, am I not?
Placated, Dewap released the gray arm.
I am he.
He tilted his head back.
Is there someone you want splashed, Duro?
I breathed a little easier, too. Playing by memory means occasional boredom and backflashes, but sometimes it saves your neck. I kept listening and playing.
Has the lovely bride offered the game yet?
Asked the Duro. Dewap flicked one tusk with a foreclaw.
What is your point?
I strained to hear the Duro answer.
There is a bigger boss on Tatooine, excellent one. Lady Valerian pays him protection money. A Whiffid who truly loves the hunt doesn't settle for small bait. My employer just offered a record bounty. You're probably not looking for work at the moment, but opportunities like this come rarely.
So the toughs were baiting Lady Val through her bridegroom, and not us. Goggle-eyed, I hit a string of offbeats and reminded myself that Jabba had plenty of time to come for us. Dewap clenched his paws over the table.
Bounty? Is it fierce bait?
The Duro shrugged.
His name is Solo, small-time smuggler, but he made the boss big-time mad. Jabba has many more enemies than Lady Valerian has, reputable Dewap.
The Duro's red eyes blinked.
May I sponsor you to the mighty Jabba?
The Whiffid's leathery nose twitched.
Record bounty?
At last, the Duro dropped his voice. I missed the numbers that clinched the deal, but DeWop sprang up.
Tell your employer that DeWop will bring in the corpse. I shall meet him then.
Solo. Figrin had mentioned him as a tolerable sabak player for a human. Now he was my fellow bait on Jabba's short list. The Duro whined.
Aren't you staying for the celebration?
Later, said DeWop.
My mate and I shall celebrate my glorious return. She is Whiffid. She will understand.
Lady Val reappeared out of the crowd. Jabba's Duro melted back into it like an ice cube on a sand dune. I held my breath. Figrin counted off another song, one I didn't know so well. I had to concentrate. Something rumbled at the foot of the stage. A deep voice shouted, "Fickle," in basic. A gruffer one called, "Dishonorable." My reed squeaked. Two bellows boomed out in an unidentifiable language. Our loving couple attacked each other, tusk and claw, right below the bandstand. I stepped back and almost tripped over Tech's Omni. Figrin missed tipping the fanfare by millimeters. A crowd gathered instantly. Mos Eisley being what it is, and with Jabba's brutes cheerleading, this brawl would spread like a sandstorm. I took advantage of a 5-beat rest and blurted out the danger signal. "Sundown! Sundown, Figrin!"
"I'm still losing," Figrin hissed. "We can't leave yet."
At the foot of the stage left, Lady Val careened sideways into a knot of onlookers. Regaining her balance, she dragged 3 of them back into the multicolored melee. DeWop whistled twice. 2 young Whiffids charged in. Jabba's toughs stampeded their side of the onlookers from behind. Lady Val shrieked. Every off-planet gangster in town and every passerby who'd had too much of Jabba rushed in on Lady Val's side. Chairs flew. One crashed into the bulkhead off stage left. Figrin bent over the Omni. "End of set, thank you very much," he announced vainly over the bedlam. Tech, wide awake for once, broke down the Omni. I couldn't find my fizz case. Glancing frantically around, I spotted white armor at the grand entry. Stormtroopers? Not even Valerian could have called in enforcement that quick. All sabak projectors shut down simultaneously, but the gang at the Uvaid table got caught with its wheel spinning. Just this once, I guessed, Jabba hadn't tipped off Lady Val. I'd have even bet that he sent the stormtroopers himself, but I don't gamble. "Back door!" Figrin leaped off one end of the stage, barely missing a bulky human's murderous backswing. We followed Figrin along the bulkhead, clutching our instruments, our livelihood. I spotted my new friend Thwim bashing heads. "Help us! We're unarmed!" I shouted. His nose swiveled toward us. He leveled his blaster into the midst of us and fired. Teddon shrieked and dropped his fanfare case. Appalled, I ducked. "Get the instruments!" Figrin cried. Nayland dove into a scrum and emerged carrying one arm at an odd angle, and 2 fanfare cases. I grabbed Teddon's unwounded arm and I pulled him closer to the hatch, mentally promising anything and everything to any deity listening, if only I could escape with my fingers unbroken and my uncased fizz undamaged. E5 stood his post, calmly blasting every being that approached him. Figrin stopped running so suddenly that Tech almost bowled him over. I glanced back over my shoulder. No use heading that way. Imperial and unlicensed weapons popped off all over the Star Chamber Cafe. Well, I reminded myself, I've always had better relations with droids than with sentients. I marched straight toward E5. "Doink!" Figrin cried. "Get back here! Get away!" E5 didn't shoot. Just as I'd figured, he still had on his recognition circuits. "Let us out," I pleaded. Something whizzed over my head from behind.
"Shut the hatch behind you,"
he honked. "Go!" I shouted at Figrin, motioning him past me. Figrin ducked away under my arm and cranked the hatch open. I stood rearguard. As daylight appeared through the hatch, beings of all shapes and sizes charged at it. I spotted the slash-mouthed human bartender among them. I hesitated. If nothing else, I owed him for a sweet mug of punch. "Come on!" I shouted. Then I ordered E5, "Don't shoot that human!" E5 may have recognized me, but he didn't take my orders. He pointed his needler straight at the bartender. Plug Ugly dropped to the floor, surprisingly agile for such a big human.
High register, he cried. Do a slide.
It sounded crazy, but I raised my uncased fizz and let out a squeal, pushing it higher with all the breath I could muster. Somewhere along the squeal, I must have hit the control frequency for that brand new restraining bolt. The droid shut down. The barman sprung up and rushed past me. We squeezed into the airlock together.
Stinking droids, he muttered,
wiping blood off his nose.
Stinking lousy droids.
I emerged on a narrow Duracrete ledge, 3 stories up. The bartender leaned back, sandwiching my fizz between his gray-belted bulk and a pitted bulkhead. "Careful, that's my horn!" I cried, teetering as I glanced down. Figrin jumped off the foot of a precipitous steel escape ladder and dashed away, dodging filth and leaping sand piles. An anvil-shaped Arcona head poked out the airlock. Clutching my fizz in one hand, I backed down the ladder. The human almost stomped my head in his hurry.
Come on, he grumbled. Move!
The ladder swayed from his weight. I barely held on, wishing I had never met the guy. As more escapees piled on, the ladder's sway became a terrifying oscillation. I kept dropping. Once down, I spotted another half-dozen stormtroopers trotting up the main ramp in formation. Another hot morning in Mos Eisley. Ignoring the trickle of escapees behind us, we ran. "Now what?" Nayland, cradling his arm against his chest, wailed.
"Without the credits from that job, how are we supposed to get off planet?"
3,000 credits, Tech moaned, wagging his large, shiny head.
3,000 credits.
I glanced down to examine my fizz. It looked undamaged. Not only that, but Figrin gambled away our reserves, seating the table so he'd win today. Didn't you, Figrin? The barman changed directions without even slowing down, and I almost got left.
"This way," he called.
"We can't pay you for a bolt hole." I hustled to catch up. "Thanks, but we're broke."
"This way," he repeated. "I'll get you a job."
He led us up street and down alley. I followed, thinking, I'll do anything, shovel sand, polish bantha saddles, but I won't work for humans. But his boss wasn't human. The Cantina owner, a beige and gray Wookiee named Shaolman, offered us a 2-season contract. No, I thought across the Wookiee's office at Figrin. It's too public, and that's too long. Jabba will find us for sure. Sounds good, Figrin answered. In Bithian, he added, once we find a way off-world, the Wookiee can keep our severance pay. Say yes. I almost walked back down the back stairs, but loyalty is loyalty. We found crash space at Ruelia's insulated rooms. We emerge daily to play at the Cantina where my only human friend, Wooher, tends bar. Solo beat Figrin at Sabak yesterday, so he's still alive, but Dawap was shipped home in pieces. Lady Val is single again, and looks to stay that way. And every time we tune up, I check the crowd. Just now, I spotted Jabba's swivel-eared green Rodian, Greedo. Greedo. He's not bright, but he's armed. I'm watching him. And that was We Don't Do Weddings, The Band's Tale by Kathy Tyers. Fun stuff. Fun stuff. I actually have to cut it early today. There is a prior obligation I had completely forgotten about, but I will do a longer one next week. Same time, same station. Thanks for tuning in if you tuned in. If you didn't, you should. Because I said so. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day.